The whistle of the train pierced the dusty air of Cedar Springs as it rolled into the station on a scorching July afternoon in 1878. Amelia Gallagher clutched her worn leather satchel tightly, her knuckles white with apprehension as she peered through the grimy window at the small frontier town that would be her new home. Her heart sank as she surveyed the wooden platform. Not a single soul stood waiting, despite the letter she'd sent ahead announcing her arrival. Amelia smoothed down her travel-worn blue dress and adjusted her small hat, summoning courage that had carried her 2,000 miles from Boston. At 22, she had abandoned everything familiar after her parents' passing left her with nothing but debts and painful memories. The conductor called out, "Cedar Springs, final stop before Tucson," his voice breaking through her thoughts. With trembling legs, Amelia descended the steps onto the wooden platform. The relentless western sun immediately assaulted her pale skin as she stood uncertainly, watching other passengers greeted by waiting family members. Her letter to her distant cousin, Martha, must have gone astray. Now she was alone in a strange town with limited funds and no immediate prospects. "Seems you're without a welcoming party, madam," came a deep voice from behind her. Amelia turned to find herself looking up at a tall man leaning against a post. The shadow from his wide-brimmed hat couldn't hide sharp blue eyes that assessed her with curiosity. Dust covered his worn denim pants and cotton shirt, and a revolver hung from his hip. Despite his weathered appearance, there was something immediately trustworthy in his stance. "You do now," he said simply, pushing off the post and approaching with an easy gait. "I beg your pardon." Amelia clutched her bag tighter. The man tipped his hat. "Yates Turner, madam, town sheriff." He gestured toward her luggage. "You're looking a bit lost, and in Cedar Springs, we don't let newcomers fend for themselves, especially not ladies traveling alone." Relief washed over Amelia, though caution remained. "Amelia Gallagher. I was expecting my cousin Martha Edwards to meet me, but it appears she's not here." Sheriff Turner's expression shifted. "Martha Edwards, from the homestead about 3 miles east." "Yes, that's right. Do you know her?" The man's face softened with unmistakable sympathy. "Miss Gallagher, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Martha passed away about a month ago. Influenza took her and her father both." The world seemed to tilt beneath Amelia's feet, the last tenuous connection to her new life gone before she'd even arrived. I had no idea. My letter." "Probably sitting at their empty homestead," Sheriff Turner said gently. "I'm sorry you've come all this way." Amelia fought back tears. She'd used most of her savings for the train ticket, believing she'd have a place to stay and perhaps work at her cousin's farm. Now she stood with nowhere to go in a town where she knew no one. "Is there a hotel where I might stay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's Mrs. Jensen's boarding house," Sheriff Turner replied. "But before you head there, let's get you something to eat. The journey from back east is a hard one." As they walked toward the town's main street, Amelia felt the curious stares of locals. Cedar Springs was smaller than she'd imagined, a single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, a far cry from Boston's cobblestone streets and brick houses. "Have you come from far, Miss Gallagher?" Sheriff Turner asked as he guided her toward a small restaurant. "Boston," she replied. "After my parents died, there wasn't much keeping me there. That's a mighty long journey to make alone. Sometimes the only path forward is the difficult one," Amelia said softly. They entered a small establishment called Emma's Kitchen, where delicious aromas momentarily distracted Amelia from her troubles. A plump woman with a kind face approached them. "Yates Turner, twice in one day, must be my lucky afternoon." The woman's eyes shifted to Amelia with undisguised curiosity. "Emma, this is Miss Amelia Gallagher, newly arrived from Boston. She's Martha Edwards' cousin." Understanding immediately dawned on Emma's face. "Oh, you poor dear, come sit down right away." Before Amelia could protest, she found herself at a table with a steaming cup of coffee and promises of the best stew west of the Mississippi. Sheriff Turner excused himself momentarily to speak with someone at the counter. "Martha was a good woman," Emma said, placing a basket of fresh bread on the table. "The whole town mourned when we lost her and her father. I hadn't seen her since we were children," Amelia admitted. We corresponded by letter occasionally. When I found myself alone, she offered me a place to stay. Emma patted her hand. Well, you're not alone now. Cedar Springs takes care of its own, and anyone who was Martha's family is welcome here. Sheriff Turner returned to the table, his expression thoughtful. Miss Gallagher, I've been considering your situation. Martha's homestead is sitting empty. By rights, as her cousin, you might have some claim to it. Hope fluttered in Amelia's chest. Truly, it would take some legal work with Judge Pearson, but it's possible. Until then, Mrs. Jensen's boarding house is your best option. After a hearty meal that Amelia could scarcely finish despite her hunger, Sheriff Turner escorted her to the boarding house, carrying her trunk with ease. Mrs. Jensen was a stern-looking widow with sharp eyes that seemed to evaluate Amelia's worth instantly. I don't abide drinking, gambling, or men visitors, she stated firmly after Sheriff Turner explained the situation. Breakfast at 6, dinner at 6, no exceptions. Yes, madam, Amelia replied meekly. As Sheriff Turner prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Miss Gallagher, I'll speak to Judge Pearson tomorrow about Martha's property. In the meantime, Emma mentioned she could use help at the restaurant if you're looking for work. That's very kind of you, Sheriff. I'm grateful for your assistance. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. In a town this size, we all help each other. Good evening, Miss Gallagher. Alone in her small room, Amelia finally allowed herself a moment of weakness. She sank onto the narrow bed and wept quietly, mourning her parents, her cousin she'd never see again, and the life she'd left behind. Yet beneath the sorrow lay a small seed of determination. She had come too far to give up now. The following morning, Amelia presented herself at Emma's kitchen, ready to work. Emma welcomed her warmly, quickly putting her to work serving customers and helping in the kitchen. Though the work was different from anything she'd done in Boston, Amelia found comfort in the busy routine and Emma's motherly presence. Sheriff Turner seems very conscientious about his duties, Amelia remarked as they washed dishes after the breakfast rush. Emma chuckled. Yates is a good man. Came here 5 years ago from Texas. Town was pretty lawless until he took the badge. Lost his wife back in Texas, I heard. Influenza, same as your cousin. He doesn't talk about it much. That explained the instant understanding in his eyes when he'd told her about Martha. A shared grief, though his was apparently older. Over the next days, Amelia settled into a rhythm in Cedar Springs. She worked at Emma's, learned the names of regular customers, and slowly began to feel less like an outsider. Sheriff Turner stopped by the restaurant daily, updating her on his progress with Judge Pearson regarding Martha's homestead. The judge says there's no other family claiming the property, he explained one afternoon as Amelia poured him coffee. But there's the matter of proving your relation to Martha. I have letters from her, Amelia offered, and my birth certificate showing our mothers were sisters. Sheriff Turner nodded. That should help. I was thinking if you're agreeable we could ride out to the homestead this Sunday. You should see what you might be taking on before making any decisions. The idea of being alone with the sheriff sent a strange flutter through Amelia's stomach, but she recognized the propriety of his suggestion. That would be most helpful, thank you. Sunday arrived clear and warm. Sheriff Turner appeared at the boarding house with 2 horses, helping Amelia mount with strong, steady hands. Though she had ridden in Boston's parks occasionally, the western saddle felt strange beneath her. Just relax and let the horse do the work, he advised. Old Pete here is gentle as a lamb. The ride out of town gave Amelia her first real look at the landscape, rolling hills dotted with scrub brush, distant mountains shimmering in the heat, and a vast sky that seemed endless. Despite the harshness of the terrain, she found an unexpected beauty in its vastness. It's not like Boston, I imagine, Sheriff Turner commented, noting her wide-eyed gaze. No, it's magnificent in its own way, untamed, he smiled. That it is. Takes a special kind of person to see the beauty in this country instead of just the hardship. The Edwards homestead appeared on the horizon, a modest cabin with a small barn and corral. A windmill creaked in the breeze, pumping water into a trough. As they drew closer, Amelia could see signs of neglect since Martha's passing uncut grass around the house, a broken fence rail, shutters hanging askew. "It's not much," Sheriff Turner said as they dismounted, "but it's good land with a reliable well. That's worth more than gold out here." Amelia approached the cabin slowly, feeling as though she were intruding despite her familial connection. Sheriff Turner unlocked the door with a key he'd brought along, and they stepped into the dim interior. The cabin was simple, but had been well kept before its owner's passing. A layer of dust covered everything, but Amelia could see Martha's touch in the handmade curtains and colorful quilt on the bed. A framed photograph on a small table caught her attention, a younger Martha standing beside an older man who must have been her father. "They were good people," Sheriff Turner said softly. "Hardworking, respected." "It feels wrong to claim their home simply because we shared blood," Amelia confessed. "What would your alternative be? Return to Boston, let the property fall to the county to be auctioned off to strangers?" He had a point. Martha had offered her a place here when she needed it most. Perhaps accepting that offer, even after Martha's passing, was the right thing to do. They explored the rest of the property, the small barn with its empty stalls, the chicken coop now vacant of hens, the modest garden plot overrun with weeds. Despite its neglected state, Amelia could see the potential, the life that had once thrived here. Could I truly make a life here? She wondered aloud as they sat on the porch steps, drinking water from Sheriff Turner's canteen. "It wouldn't be easy," he answered honestly. "Farming here requires grit and determination. You'd need help, at least at first." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Sheriff Turner." "I believe that about you, Miss Gallagher." His blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary before he looked away. "And please call me Yates. Then you must call me Amelia." The ride back to town was filled with comfortable conversation. Amelia learned that Yates had been a Texas Ranger before coming to Cedar Springs, that he had a talent for wood carving, and that his favorite meal was Emma's beef stew with dumplings. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Boston, her father's bookshop that had failed during hard times, and her love of poetry. "Wordsworth?" he asked, surprising her with his knowledge. "Or perhaps Whitman?" "Both," she admitted. "Though my father preferred the classics Shakespeare and Milton." "I have a few books," he offered. "Nothing like a Boston bookshop, but you're welcome to borrow them anytime." By the time they returned to the boarding house, Amelia had made her decision. "I would like to claim the homestead if Judge Pearson allows it." Yates nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I'll speak with him tomorrow. In the meantime, I'd be happy to help you make repairs when needed." In the weeks that followed, Amelia's life transformed completely. Judge Pearson, a pragmatic man with bushy eyebrows, reviewed her documentation and declared her the rightful heir to the Edwards homestead. With her meager savings, she purchased essential supplies and, with Yates's help, began restoring the property. The town rallied around her. Emma provided meals, Mr. Peterson from the Mercantile extended credit, and several local men helped repair the roof and fences. Amelia continued working at the restaurant while slowly preparing the homestead for her eventual move. Yates became a constant presence in her life, spending his free time at the homestead building shelves, fixing the windmill, and teaching Amelia the basics of farming. Their friendship deepened through shared work and conversation, though both carefully maintained proper boundaries. "My wife Catherine would have liked you," Yates said one evening as they sat on the porch after a day of painting shutters. "She had the same determination." It was the first time he'd spoken of his late wife directly. "How long were you married?" Amelia asked gently. 3 years. "Long enough to know happiness, not long enough to start the family we wanted." His voice carried old pain but no longer seemed raw with it. "The fever took her while I was away tracking rustlers. I couldn't forgive myself for not being there." "Is that why you left Texas?" He nodded slowly. "Too many memories. I needed a fresh start." "I understand that better than most," Amelia said softly, thinking of her own journey. Their eyes met in the fading light, an understanding passing between them that needed no words. For a breathless moment, Amelia thought he might reach for her hand, but the distant howl of a coyote broke the spell. "It's getting late," Yates said, standing. "I should get you back to Mrs. Jensen's before she locks the door." Summer faded into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets that painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Amelia finally moved into the homestead, though Emma and Mrs. Jensen both expressed concerns about a young woman living alone so far from town. "It's not proper," Mrs. Jensen insisted. "My cousin Martha managed it," Amelia countered. "Martha had her father with her," Emma pointed out, "and she'd grown up here, knew how to handle herself." Despite their concerns, Amelia was determined. Yates helped her move her few belongings and presented her with a gift, a small revolver. "I hope you never need it," he said seriously, "but I'd feel better knowing you can protect yourself." He spent several afternoons teaching her to shoot, his hands guiding hers on the weapon, his voice steady as he explained how to aim and fire. Amelia proved a quick study, though the intimacy of those lessons left her flustered in a way that had nothing to do with the desert heat. Life on the homestead established its own rhythm. Amelia planted a small garden, acquired 6 chickens from a neighboring farm, and continued working part-time at Emma's. She threw herself into learning everything she could about frontier living, borrowing books and seeking advice from experienced locals. One morning in late October, Amelia awoke to find frost glittering on the ground and smoke rising from the chimney of her cabin. Alarmed, she grabbed her revolver and cautiously approached the main room, only to find Yates stoking the fire he'd built. "Good morning," he said calmly, as if appearing in her home at dawn was perfectly normal. "Thought you might appreciate a warm fire. It's the coldest morning we've had." Amelia lowered the gun, her heart still racing. "You startled me." "Good instincts," he approved, nodding at the revolver. "But next time maybe check who it is before you come out pointing that thing." "What are you doing here so early?" Yates looked suddenly uncertain, a rare expression for him. "I brought you something." He gestured to a burlap sack near the door. "Winter's coming and your woodpile looked low." Amelia peered into the sack to find it filled with apples. "Where did these come from?" Widow Hanson's orchard. "She lets me pick them each fall in exchange for repairing her fence." He hesitated. "I thought maybe we could make preserves. My mother taught me how." The image of the stoic sheriff making apple preserves was so unexpected that Amelia couldn't help but smile. "I'd like that." They spent the day in domestic harmony, peeling and slicing apples, boiling them with sugar and cinnamon that Yates had thoughtfully brought along. The cabin filled with delicious aromas as they worked side by side, their conversation flowing easily between serious topics and lighthearted banter. "You're different than I expected," Amelia admitted as they sealed the last jar. "How so?" "Most men I knew in Boston would consider this women's work beneath them." Yates shrugged. "Out here, survival doesn't care much about what's proper for men or women. Everyone does what needs doing." As twilight approached, Yates reluctantly prepared to leave. "I should head back to town, got my rounds to make." At the door, he turned back, something unspoken in his eyes. "Amelia, I've been thinking, there's the harvest dance next Saturday in town. Would you consider attending with me?" A public social engagement was different from their work together at the homestead. It would signal to the town that their relationship had intentions beyond friendship. Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "I would be honored, Yates." His smile transformed his face. "I'll come by to escort you at 6. The week passed slowly for Amelia, who found herself checking her appearance in the small mirror more often than usual. She carefully pressed her best dress, a dark green wool with modest lace trim, and even splurged on a ribbon for her hair from the mercantile. Emma teased her gently when she came to work. "So the sheriff finally gathered his courage. The whole town's been watching you two dance around each other for months." "We've simply been friends," Amelia protested weakly. "Friends who look at each other like that?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't born yesterday, child." When Saturday arrived, Amelia spent extra time preparing, heating water for a proper bath and arranging her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. As 6 o'clock approached, nervous anticipation fluttered in her stomach. The sound of approaching hoofbeats brought her to the window. Yates rode into view, but not alone. 3 other riders accompanied him, their postures tense. Amelia's heart sank as she opened the door. Yates dismounted quickly, his expression grim. "Amelia, I'm sorry. There's been trouble in town. The Blackwell gang was spotted nearby. We think they might be planning to rob the bank when the payroll comes in Monday." The Blackwell gang had been terrorizing small towns throughout the territory for months. Their reputation for ruthlessness preceded them. "Of course," Amelia said, trying to hide her disappointment, "you need to protect the town." "I've got men watching the roads," Yates explained, "but I wanted to make sure you were safe out here." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though the thought of armed outlaws in the vicinity was unsettling. "Pack a bag," Yates said firmly. "You're coming back to town with us. You can stay at Mrs. Jensen's until this is resolved. But the chickens, the garden, Josh here will ride out tomorrow to check on things." Yates nodded toward one of his deputies. "Your safety is more important." There was no arguing with the determination in his eyes. Amelia quickly packed essentials and secured the cabin. The ride to town was tense, with Yates constantly scanning the horizon, his hand never far from his gun. Cedar Springs was unusually quiet when they arrived, with most businesses closed early and few people on the streets. Yates escorted Amelia directly to the boarding house, where Mrs. Jensen welcomed her with surprising warmth. "Such terrible timing," the older woman clucked sympathetically. "And you all dressed up for the dance, too?" "There'll be other dances," Amelia said, though the disappointment lingered. For 3 days, the town held its breath, waiting for trouble. Yates and his deputies patrolled constantly, and local men volunteered to stand watch. Amelia helped Emma prepare meals for the men on duty, catching only glimpses of Yates as he coordinated the town's defense. On the 4th morning, gunshots shattered the dawn quiet. Amelia jolted awake at Mrs. Jensen's, her heart pounding as more shots followed. Through the window, she could see men running toward the bank, shouting directions to each other. Mrs. Jensen appeared at her door in a nightgown, her gray hair in braids. "Stay inside, child. Those reprobates must have decided to hit the bank early." For nearly an hour, sporadic gunfire continued. Amelia paced anxiously, praying for Yates's safety. When silence finally fell, it seemed more ominous than the shooting. Another hour passed before a knock came at the boarding house door. Mrs. Jensen opened it to reveal a deputy, his arm bandaged but otherwise intact. "Sheriff sent me to tell you ladies it's over," he announced. "We captured 2 of the Blackwell boys, but 3 got away. Sheriff Turner took a bullet, but Doc says he'll be fine." Amelia's knees nearly buckled with relief, though concern quickly followed. "Where is he? At the doctor's?" "Yes, madam. But he said not to worry the ladies." Amelia was already pulling on her shawl, ignoring Mrs. Jensen's protests about propriety. She hurried through the street, noting the damaged storefront of the bank and a small crowd gathered outside the doctor's office. Inside, she found Yates sitting upright on an examination table, his shirt removed while the doctor bandaged his upper arm. His face was pale, but he managed a smile when he saw her. "I told Josh not to worry you," he said. "A bullet wound is something to worry about," Amelia replied, moving to his side. The doctor, an elderly man with spectacles, finished tying off the bandage. "Clean through the flesh, nothing vital hit, he's lucky." He looked at Amelia appraisingly. "Since you're here, Miss Gallagher, perhaps you could make sure this stubborn man actually rests for a day or 2. He's already talking about riding after the escapees." "My deputies can handle that," Yates protested weakly. "I'll see that he rests," Amelia promised. Despite his objections, Yates allowed Amelia to help him to his small house behind the sheriff's office. The modest dwelling was neat but Spartan, with few personal touches beyond a bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes and a framed deputy's badge from his Texas days. "You should lie down," Amelia instructed, guiding him to a chair instead when he refused the bed. "I've had worse," he insisted, though his pallor suggested the wound and blood loss had affected him more than he admitted. Amelia busied herself making coffee and finding bread and preserves for a simple meal. As she moved around his kitchen, she felt a strange rightness to the domestic scene, despite the circumstances. "I'm sorry about the dance," Yates said after finishing his coffee. "There will be others," Amelia repeated her earlier sentiment. "Will there?" His blue eyes held hers intently. "Amelia, when I heard the first shots this morning, my only thought was of you, not the bank, not the town, but whether you were safe." She set down the cup she was washing, her heart quickening. "Yates, I know it hasn't been long," he continued, And maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but life out here is uncertain. Today made that clear again. I don't want to waste time pretending I don't care for you more than I should." Amelia crossed the small room to stand before him. "How much more than you should?" she asked softly. "Enough that I think about you from sunrise to sunset. Enough that the homestead feels more like home when I'm there with you than this place ever has." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not a wealthy man, Amelia. All I have to offer is a life that won't be easy but would be honest and true." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "When I stepped off that train and found no one waiting, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Now I see it was Providence." Slowly, mindful of his injured arm, Yates stood and drew her closer. "Are you saying yes to a question I haven't properly asked yet?" "Ask it properly and find out," she whispered. "Amelia Gallagher, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I would." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with months of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, both breathless, Amelia couldn't help but laugh softly. "What's amusing?" Yates asked. "I was just thinking about that first day at the train station. You do now, you said, when I had no one waiting. How right you were." 2 months later, on a crisp December morning, Amelia stood before the small church in Cedar Springs, wearing a new dress of pale blue that Emma had helped her make. Through the window, she could see the townspeople gathering friends who had become like family in her short time there. Judge Pearson, who had given her Martha's homestead, now waited to perform the ceremony. Emma fussed with Amelia's hair, adding a sprig of winter berries to the simple arrangement. "You look beautiful, child," the older woman said, blinking back tears. "Your parents would be proud, Martha too." "I wish they could be here," Amelia admitted, "but somehow I feel they are in spirit." When the music began, Mrs. Peterson playing the church's small organ, Amelia took a deep breath and stepped into the church. At the altar stood Yates, more handsome than she'd ever seen him in a new black suit, his badge polished and gleaming, his eyes fixed on her with such devotion it nearly took her breath away. As she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most beautiful sight I've ever seen." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when Judge Pearson pronounced them husband and wife, the small church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration moved to Emma's restaurant, where tables had been pushed aside for dancing. As Yates led Amelia in their first dance as husband and wife, he held her close, mindful of the watching townspeople but unwilling to be too far from her. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "When I left Boston, I was seeking refuge. Instead, I found a home, and you will have challenges," he warned. "The homestead needs work, and being a sheriff's wife isn't always easy." "We'll face them together," Amelia said with confidence. "After all, I'm not alone anymore." Yates smiled, the expression lighting his entire face. "You never will be again, that's a promise." As they danced beneath lantern light, surrounded by the community that had embraced them both, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the loss, the courage it took to start over, the moment she stepped off that train with no one waiting. How wrong she had been. Someone had been waiting. After all, she just hadn't met him yet. In the years that followed, the Turner homestead flourished under their joint care. Yates continued as sheriff while helping with the farm, and Amelia expanded the garden into a small orchard. When their first child arrived, a daughter they named Martha Catherine, their joy seemed complete, though 2 sons would later join the family. Often, on summer evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert gold, their hands intertwined, marveling at the twists of fate that had brought them together. From the ashes of loss, they had built something beautiful, a life neither had imagined possible, when their paths first crossed on a dusty train platform in Cedar Springs.